My name's Alistair Tudor. I'm the Operations Manager for Somerset Chamber of Commerce, and I'm joined by Chris Loach, who's the Area Director for Lloyds. We're going to be having a quick conversation around the CBILS Scheme and some tips really for you as businesses on how to best access this scheme and give yourselves the best chance of accessing this money. So, Chris, could you give us a little bit of background into the CBILS Scheme itself and how it's come about, please?
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. And first of all, good morning, everybody. So the CBILS scheme, it's part of the overall government package of support for businesses to access finance as part of the COVID-19 response. It actually stands for the Corona Business Interruption Loan Scheme. And as the Chancellor spoke about probably 2-3 weeks ago now, it was part of the response by central government to allow businesses to access finance through their bank to be able to look at really important stages within their own business to be able to access capital to be able to keep their businesses running during this current crisis.
Excellent. And I appreciate there's probably quite a lot of impact or changes to the way that you've had to do business and things that you've had to put in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So the CBILS scheme is basically the father of what was the enterprise finance guarantee. So some of the mechanism for operating these kind of schemes was already in place. However, since the government officially went live, which was on the 23rd of last month, the banks have all had to do a huge amount of work in the background to align their processes and make sure that the CBILS process is fit for purpose. So our core responsibility is to get the access to the capital available and to get that into businesses' bank accounts as soon as possible. But it's been a huge amount of work that we've had to do to get us into that position.
Okay.
I think what's pleasing, Alistair, is we're now in a stage where I think most of the financial organisations would have done that work, and the flow of capital is now starting to hit most.
Okay, good. And in terms of the actual scheme itself, as I understand it, 80% of the loan is guaranteed by government?
Yeah, so let me, I guess, talk a little about the guarantee. So I think the guarantee is actually, it's a mechanism between the banks and the government. So the guarantee is of probably little value or little of interest to the client because ultimately a business still remains 100% liable for the money that they're looking to borrow. But it allows, the government guarantee allows a bank to look at the overall risk perspective of lending money. And as a result of that, it can look to recoup funds if for any reason it couldn't recoup the 100% from the client in a sort of failed situation. But I think the guarantee is a lot of discussion around this because I think a lot of businesses look at the guarantee as a sort of get out of jail card, really. But actually, it shouldn't be perceived to be that way because a business is 100% liable for that loan. The guarantee is there really as a protection mechanism between the bank and the government.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of actually accessing this, there's been quite a lot of sort of headlines around the number of businesses that have been able to access money via the CBILS scheme. I know that you and I have had conversations in the past about how businesses should be approaching this if they want to access this money. What would be the kind of the top tips that you would have for a business that is looking at accessing the CBILS scheme itself?
So I think the first one is speak to your existing provider. Everybody has a relationship with some kind of bank. They will be needing that to operate the business. So first of all, go to the path of least resistance. Speak to your bank. Speak to the person that knows you. Speak to the person that knows your business. But equally, do a little bit of research yourself. Understand exactly what the British Business Bank is doing. So effectively, they are the government quasi body that is operating the CBILS scheme. There's plenty of information available on the British Business Bank website. It signposts to really helpful user guides. There's information there about eligibility. There's information there about the size of the loans that you can apply for. So I think there's a whole lot of background stuff, Alistair. But I think the critical bit really is when you reach a point where you are looking to speak to your bank, is to have done some preparation work. So typically, a bank will want to have a conversation with you about the request. So the kind of things that you would probably need to have available is some up-to-date management information. So how is the performance of the business currently? What was the performance of the business ahead of COVID-19 and the impacts that we're seeing? And more importantly, what does the expected trajectory look like for you and your business as we look to come out the other side of the current crisis we're facing? What helps that is a cash flow forecast. So, what are the pressures you're seeing within your business at the moment? Where are the peaks? And how does that relate to the amount you're actually requesting? It's sensible to think about a business plan. So from your perspective, how will you be using the funds? What will those funds be used for? And how does that fit with the other elements of the government support that's available? So for instance, most businesses will be looking at furloughing. Absolutely critical we keep as many people in employment as possible. So how does your loan reflect that? And what are you looking to cover in terms of the financial requesting? And then I guess finally, some points around a previous accounting. So realistically, we would be looking for 3 years accounts from any business, because if we think back to what the government are trying to achieve with the CBILS scheme, it's to retain a sense of normality for businesses during this crisis. So what was a good business? We need to make sure those good businesses continue to trade throughout this period and more importantly, come out the other side. However, those 3 years accounts for many businesses will be very variable. So you might not have a position which you're feeling particularly comfortable with on one of those 3 particular years. That's really important to understand that and work with the other professionals to tell the story to the bank you're approaching. So, for instance, if for any reason you made a loss in a particular year, that shouldn't be a deal breaker. But from the perspective of being able to understand and explain the reasons for that, it's absolutely critical.
Okay, good. I guess the overriding message here is to treat this like a normal business loan. I think when the news kind of first broke of what the government were doing, it was lauded as an option for businesses to get hold of easy cash that would be guaranteed by the government, so there shouldn't be anything stopping you from accessing this. But actually, I think that the reality is, and we always said the devil is in the detail when you start to look at the announcements from government. The advice would be to treat this as a normal business loan at any other time. Do your research. Think about how you can be as viable an option for your bank as possible in terms of your plans, as you say, the cash flow forecast. How are you going to repay this? It is a loan, it's not a grant, it will need to be repaid. So as a bank, you are looking at what the plans are for the business and what the viability of repaying that loan is, in the same way that you would do as a normal loan, even if it's not guaranteed under the CBILS scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of nuances in what you've just alluded to, Alistair. So absolutely, when you approach your bank, you should be approaching your bank in the same way you would do for finance in a normal BAU environment. However, I guess the principles of what the government have been looking at with regards to CBILS is the facility has been put in place to help businesses guide themselves through this next period of uncertainty. So the principles of the scheme have been designed for that benefit.
Yeah.
So some nuances of the scheme which are different than your typical BAU loans. Your bank wouldn't be charging you an arrangement fee to set the loan up for you. You have to repayment holidays. There's a time interest only period, which will be very different to a typical BAU loan. And that said, the normal business opportunities of BAU loans and all the other facilities that banks provide are still there and available to help and support you. But CBILS is primarily there, and it's been designed for the purpose of supporting businesses throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you are approaching your bank for finance and it is a BAU purpose, probably a CBILS scheme isn't the right solution for you.
Yeah.
And that's a really important point, Alistair.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. There is one more which is around the way that you can access this via your bank. I know the scheme has been broadened out to include more banks. I know there's some difficult situations where people are banking with organisations that are not part of the scheme. I guess it's going to be difficult for the other banks to be dealing with those companies because they don't know those businesses.
Yes. Yeah, so principally there was a initial panel of 40 lenders that were approved to offer CBILS. That list is growing, and pleasingly, because the more lenders, the better. But I think the initial sort of big four high street banks, probably not surprisingly, have been swamped in terms of requests.
Yeah.
So most of the message back from the big four banks is being very much around, we need to be able to support our existing clients first before we can look for, before we can look to support other businesses. Now, your example, if a client or a business is banking with a provider that doesn't offer CBILS, clearly I would still expect to be able to look to help those businesses, but we have to be realistic. The volumes of inquiries that we're dealing with, we need to first of all, support our own existing clients. So, the principles of CBILS is to help the UK economy. It's to help the businesses that need it the most. It's not a marketing exercise and a sales pitch by banks, is it? It's absolutely not what the banks are looking to do. So, principally, go to your existing bank first. If your existing bank can't help you because they're not a member of the scheme, the other banks will help you. But that's probably where a little bit of lobbying from you guys at the chamber helps, because it helps to tell that story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we're picking up with the BCC, which feed directly into Westminster. It's great having this scheme there, and hopefully giving more businesses the option of getting hold of this cash under the scheme. But we need to make sure that it covers all businesses, and that all businesses can get access to the money and the funds in a timely fashion to enable them to be supported. There's a lot of pressure on cash flow at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. The principles of what we're all trying to achieve is get the money out the door as quickly as possible. And actually, I think what's been pleasing about CBILS is it has evolved since the initial launch on the 23rd. So, we've seen changes in terms of, the points around personal guarantees. That's a lot more flexible now. And, the scheme continues to flex and simplify, to allow, the principal purpose of getting cash out the door to help the businesses that need it the most.
Yeah.
So, it will continue to evolve, and pleasingly, all parties are working together to try and achieve that goal.
Brilliant. Okay. Look, I think I've taken up enough of your time, but I just want to say thank you very, very much. It's certainly been good to get a steer from the bank as a sector perspective on what the CBILS scheme is about, and how best to support businesses in terms of applying for it, and how they can help themselves, really. So Chris Loach of Lloyds, thank you very much for your time today.
Great. Thanks, Alistair. Speak soon.
Cheers.